Initially known as the Bureau of Investigation, the BOI, the FBI came into being in 1908. Since then, it has handled a wide variety of cases as it claims jurisdiction over 200 categories of federal crimes. With such a broad scope, it's no wonder that the FBI has had to deal with more than its fair share of quirky questionings and strange studies. In the video today, we're looking at 10 of these. Number 10. The Majestic 12. During the 1980s, a memo started circulating in ufologist circles that was purported to be a leaked government document. It referenced the existence of a shadowy organization known as Majestic 12 or MJ-12, which consisted of high-level government officials, military leaders, and scientists. Formed under the executive order of President Harry Truman, their purpose was the covert investigation and recovery of alien aircraft. Although the document became public knowledge in the 1980s, it was dated to 1952 and represented confidential correspondence between President Eisenhower and the CIA. It apprised the president of the organization's investigation efforts into the extraterrestrial crash from Roswell, New Mexico. Among the members of MJ-12 were Science Administrator Vannevar Bush, first U.S. Secretary of Defense James Forrestal, and biophysicist Detlev Bronk. Both the FBI and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations conducted inquiries into the leaked documents and concluded that they were completely bogus. No such committee had ever been formed, and Harry Truman's signature, although genuine, was a photocopy obtained from a different document. Over 3 decades have passed since the emergence of Majestic 12, and the concept it still remains popular with UFO true believers. Having the FBI dismiss it as a hoax only strengthened the belief for some conspiracy theories that it's all just part of an elaborate cover-up. Number 9. The Vulgar Song. In 1955, doo-wop musician Richard Berry composed the rock classic Louie Louie. It has been covered dozens of times, but the most successful version was a 1963 song by the Kingsmen. Lead singer Jack Ely employed a strange, slurred singing style that made some of the lyrics nearly unintelligible. This prompted the rumor that the lyrics were obscene. The concept became so widespread that the FBI stepped in to investigate. All over the country, concerned parents were writing to government officials to warn them of the filth that was corrupting the youth of America. They often included copies of the vulgar lyrics from Louie Louie, but they tended to differ since they couldn't actually hear the words and, well, they let their imaginations fill in the blanks. The FBI dedicated 2 years into looking into this pressing issue and amassed a file over 100 pages long. They heard claims that the obscene lyrics became clearer if you slowed down the record or played it faster or even played it backwards. They tried them all. After all of that effort, their conclusion was that the recording was indecipherable at any speed. Number 8. The Elusive Creature. Normally, the FBI conducts criminal investigations. However, it does make exceptions every now and again in the interest of research and scientific inquiry. During the 1970s, the Bureau made one such exception and looked into the claims of a cryptozoologist who said that he had physical evidence of Bigfoot. Peter Byrne started the Bigfoot Information Center and exhibition in Oregon in the 1960s. A decade later, he found some hair and skin samples which he believed belonged to the elusive beast. Back then, there weren't many places that could run tests to determine the origin of hairs, so Byrne began writing to the FBI. In 1976, Assistant Director Jay Cochran with the Bureau's Scientific and Technical Services Division agreed to examine the evidence. FBI analysts looked at the structure of the hairs and compared them to those of known origin and concluded that they belonged to an animal from the deer family. Number 7. The Hottel Memo. Although the Guy Hottel Memo about aliens does not strictly refer to an actual FBI investigation, it merits inclusion in this video because it's the most popular file available in the FBI online vault. In just 2 years after it was first posted in 2011, it was viewed over 1 million times. And most surprisingly of all, it has nothing to do with Roswell. It concerns an unrelated event that happened 3 years later in 1950. Although it still took place in New Mexico, it involves 3 alien spaceships that allegedly crashed near the city of Aztec in San Juan County. The document that got everyone hot and bothered was a memo from Guy Hottel, the head of the Washington, D.C. field office, addressed to Director J. Edgar Hoover. Dated to March 22, 1950, it related the story that another FBI agent heard pertaining to the crashed ships. It also specified that each spacecraft contained 3 aliens, human-like, but only 3 feet tall, wearing metallic cloth of very fine texture. The memo ended saying that no further evaluation was attempted. The document itself is not noteworthy. It simply related an odd incident that happened to an agent and was relayed to FBI headquarters per protocol to be archived in the records. It also specified that the FBI never looked into the matter. However, when it was first posted online, people and even media outlets incorrectly concluded that it referred to an actual investigation into aliens that was conducted by the FBI. Moreover, some even thought that it was connected to the Roswell incident. Number 6. The writer who could have been a spy. The last years of author Ernest Hemingway were plagued by health issues, worries, and depression that eventually drove the writer to suicide in 1961. Among his most notorious issues was his resolute belief that he was being spied on by the FBI. Hemingway complained to those around him that all of his phones were bugged, his mail was being intercepted, and undercover agents followed him everywhere. His friends and family, they dismissed this as a delusion, but decades later, we learned that Hemingway was actually absolutely correct. During the 1980s, it was revealed that the FBI had a file on the author of over 120 pages long. Their interest in him stretched all the way back to World War II, but was greatly increased over the following decades thanks to Hemingway's frequent trips to Cuba. There were concerns that he might have been recruited to work as a spy for the Soviets. Hemingway's close friend and biographer, A.E. Hotchner, was the first to bring to surface the author's paranoia over FBI surveillance when he wrote Papa Hemingway in 1966. Back then, he dismissed the claim, but in recent years, he has expressed regret over not believing his friend. Not only that, but he is firm of the opinion that it was one of the main contributing factors that led to the Nobel Prize winner's anguish and his eventual suicide. In Hemingway's own words, it was the worst hell, the goddamnedest hell. Number 5. The Navy officer who also could have been a spy. Still in World War II, the FBI launched an investigation into Inga Arvad. She was a Danish journalist and former beauty queen who moved to America and wrote for the Washington Times-Herald. Before the outbreak of the war, she once interviewed Hitler, and he proclaimed Arvad to be a perfect example of a Nordic beauty. She was even a guest at his private box during the Berlin Olympics. This past connection made the FBI fearful that Arvad might be a spy, so they surveilled her. At that time, they discovered she was having an affair with a tousle-haired young man, initially known only as Jack. They later identified him as 24-year-old John F. Kennedy. Once they knew who he was, Kennedy became a part of the investigation. As an up-and-coming Navy officer, he would have made a good target for Arvad to turn should she actually be a spy. JFK's father, former Ambassador Joe Kennedy, wanted his son to end the relationship, but like many other forbidden romances, this only made it more enticing for the young Kennedy. He was reassigned to a desk job in Charleston, South Carolina, but the affair continued. And so did the surveillance, as the FBI bugged their bedroom and had a front row seat for the amorous liaisons between Arvad and Kennedy. This was eventually what persuaded the future president to call it quits on their tryst and focus his attention on his political career. Number 4. The mysterious message. If you're good at cracking codes, then you might be able to assist the FBI. Since 2011, the organization has launched a public appeal for help deciphering 2 messages which have stumped their cryptography experts for 2 decades. On the 30th of June 1999, the body of 41-year-old Ricky McCormick was found in a cornfield off Route 367. It was in a state of advanced decomposition, and fingerprints were used to ID the body. No official cause of death could be determined. Alongside the remains were 2 notes which consisted of random letters and numbers, sometimes separated by parentheses. The FBI put the Cryptanalysis and Racketeering Records Unit, CRRU, on the case. Later, they turned to the American Cryptogram Association for help, but both have hit a brick wall and are looking to the general public for help. Since word of these secret messages came out, McCormick's friends and family expressed skepticism that he could have written them, as Ricky was barely literate. If he did, there is a fair chance that the messages represent random jumbles of words and letters with no hidden meaning behind them. Even so, the CRRU still lists the Rocky McCormick homicide as one of its top unsolved cases. Number 3. The Otherworldly Power. During the 1950s, the FBI decided that it was time to look into extrasensory perception, or ESP. Should there be any merit to the idea, it would prove immeasurably valuable to law enforcement and counterintelligence. The possible rewards were so tantalizing that the Bureau simply could not afford not to inquire into this matter more fully. At the same time, it realized that such an investigation would be met with incredulity, which is why it had to be considered completely discreet and controlled to avoid embarrassment. The main inquiry concerned William Foose, a man from Richmond, Virginia, who gained quite a bit of attention at the time for his alleged ESP abilities. He claimed to be able to make blind people see by projecting images onto their minds. In 1957, the FBI reached out to Foose. Although he refused to submit to any scientific testing, he did give a few private demonstrations in front of members of the CIA, Army Intelligence, and the Veterans Administration. They were not impressed with his results and said that at no point did Foose display any ESP abilities. The FBI quietly stopped their relationship with Foose, and although they made a few inquiries into ESP, we are no closer to psychic super spies than we were before. Number 2. The Kidnapped Heiress. One of the most massive investigations in FBI history was also one of its most bizarre. It started out as a search and rescue for Patty Hearst, a kidnapping victim and granddaughter of newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst. By the time the FBI tracked her down, she was no longer just a victim. In what is arguably the most famous case of Stockholm Syndrome, Patty Hearst had joined up with her kidnappers and taken part in a bank robbery, as well as several other crimes. But had she really turned to the dark side, or was she simply brainwashed by her captors? That was the main question that everyone pondered after Patty Hearst was arrested and headed for trial. On February 4th, 1974, she had been kidnapped by a domestic terrorist group called the Symbionese Liberation Army, or SLA. 2 months later, surveillance footage showed Hearst, now responding to the name Tanya, robbing the Hibernia Bank in San Francisco's Sunset District alongside Donald DeFreeze, the leader of the group. DeFreeze and 5 other members of the SLA were killed in a shootout with the LAPD in May. Hearst stayed on the run with a few other remaining members until September of the next year, when she was finally apprehended by FBI agents and San Francisco detectives. At her trial, Patty Hearst's lawyers argued that she had been brainwashed. Whether or not this is true is still a matter of debate that's likely to divide a room. She was sentenced to 35 years in prison, later reduced to 7. President Jimmy Carter commuted her sentence after 22 months served, and Bill Clinton gave her a presidential pardon in 2001 on his last day in office. Number 1. The Hollow Nickel. The 2015 historical drama Bridge of Spies tells the story of a tense negotiation during the Cold War to exchange downed American pilot Francis Gary Powers for Soviet spy Rudolf Abel. However, the FBI investigation and capture of Abel is a story in and of itself. It all started in 1953 in New York, when a delivery boy with the Brooklyn Eagle was collecting his fee from his customers. A couple of ladies gave him a strange nickel, one which was lighter than the rest and bizarrely turned out to be hollow. Inside, there was a tiny photograph with a series of numbers. Word of the strange nickel, it reached the police and eventually the FBI. The latter were convinced that the coin was a spy gadget used to pass along coded information. They began analyzing the message, as well as keeping an eye out for similar incidents all over the country. For a while, it seemed like the investigation was destined to be in the unsolved column, until the solution walked right through the door. Specifically, it walked right through the door of the US Embassy in Paris. His name was Eugene Mackey, an American-born laborer who moved to the United States from Finland. In reality, he was Raino Haihanen, a Russian spy who wanted to defect because he enjoyed his life in America and did not want to return to Soviet Russia. Haihanen was very forthcoming with information regarding the secrets of his trade. He showed FBI agents the various hollowed-out items used to carry messages and the dead drops where they were left and picked up. He also gave up his 2 KGB contacts. One of them was already back in Russia and beyond the reach of the FBI. The other was Rudolf Abel, real name William August Fisher. As for the coded message inside the hollow nickel, it simply welcomed Haihanen to the United States and gave basic instructions on getting started. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do smash that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe as well and hit that bell button so you do find out when we put out a new video. Also, why not check out my other channel? It's called Biographics. We do biographies of notable people from the present day as well as history. That is linked to below. And as always, thank you for watching.